Hello, Aries. Welcome to your monthly zodiac reading for the month of April 2025. As always, please check your sun, moon, and rising because even though we're focusing on the rising sign, the area of your chart being activated by the transits the most could be your sun or your moon. So please make sure that you check those areas in case this reading doesn't resonate with you. Now, given the Aries pileup that we're experiencing and that we will continue to experience over the next several years, it not resonating with your rising sign, you would have to have some serious planets in a different section of your chart. But I digress. As always, we are going to pull an overall energy theme for the month. We will pull tarot for each week, clarify that with more tarot, talk about the astrological transits, and wrap it up with some additional oracle guidance. So let's see what Aries risings need to know for the month of April. The Metal King, discipline, armor, and boundaries, but this is in reverse. So it could be that there's a struggle with boundaries. Venus is currently, well, no, actually, I take that back. She retrograded back into Pisces today. But Mercury is, where's Mercury right now? Venus retrograded back into Pisces, and she can really struggle with boundaries when it comes to either herself and other people, herself and what it is that she values. She really can struggle with those boundaries. But it looks like overall, you guys could really that could be a point of contention for the month. So let's get some tarot. We're going to do this one first. All right, here, the Devil here in the first week, the Ace of Wands in reverse here in the second week, the Ten of Swords in reverse, the Ace of Wands in reverse, the Ten of Swords in reverse here in the third week, and the Eight of Cups. Okay, so here in this first week, we've got the Devil. The Devil represents tendencies towards unhealthy habits, unhealthy mindsets, ways of escapism, or choices that we make, even unhealthy relationships. And again, that could be either with another person or even with ourselves or material possessions. Because again, we're talking about Venus retrograde here in this first week. Venus retrograde is going to be sitting next to the North Node in Pisces, as well as Saturn in Pisces. Saturn rules Capricorn. Capricorn governs the energy of the Devil. So this is a lot about control. That kind of feels like control. And it could be that with Venus being retrograde, it could be triggering this sense of control when it comes to what it is that you're valuing, what it is that you're desiring, what it is that you're going after, and even again within relationships, right? So it could be that the North Node is trying to get you to approach things with a very different, almost like softer approach is what it feels like, a much softer approach. And it's Saturn being there is trying to get you to understand that any obstacles or challenges that you're experiencing, that you need to surrender and not try to control the outcome. Here in the second week, we've got the Ace of Wands in reverse. Aces are new opportunities or new beginnings. Wands represents our desire and action towards those desires. But when the ace is in reverse, it can represent that the energy is being blocked in some way. It can represent low energy, like you're just exhausted and tired, or it can really represent that something was a false start. You thought something was starting, and then the energy has now died out and it feels like it's stalling. This is the week that we actually have Mercury going direct within the sign of Pisces. Mercury went retrograde within Aries, within your sign, and is now retrograded back into the sign of Pisces at this point. That is happening on the 7th. It's now going to go direct. So with Mercury, it could be that you're struggling with ideas, maybe struggling with communication a little bit. Things just seem to be moving very slowly. So it could be that there's the need to maybe have a little bit more compassion for yourself here in this second week. Now, I also want to mention that the sun in Aries is going to be sitting next to Chiron in Aries. So we're still really working through these wounds around our sense of self. And the sun conjunct Chiron is really going to highlight that. Okay. So again, when it comes to discipline, and it also has a word armor in reverse, like maybe you need to take your armor off this month. Moving into that soft, like I said, taking off that harder shell, taking off that harder edge, stepping into a place of vulnerability. But with the Ace of Wands in reverse, it can really feel like a false start. And there's just really low energy. And like Mercury going direct, you're like, I don't have the energy to do anything. And that's kind of, I feel like, par for the course with Mercury and Pisces. Pisces is a very watery sign. It has no boundaries. It can go anywhere, which makes the potential very infinite. But anytime a planet stations direct, it's kind of like they're recovering from the flu and they're still just trying to get their bearings about them. So it could be that there's a lack of energy or maybe even a lack of ideas around growth. Here in the third week, this is the pile up that we're looking at here for the month of April. This is when we're going to experience on the 13th, the full moon happening within the sign of Libra. Libra for you guys is sitting in your 7th house of business contracts and even romantic partnerships. So here, the full moon is a buildup of energy and it's a culmination. So it can feel very intense. Thankfully, we are out of eclipse season's grasp, but it does not mean that this full moon is not going to feel any less uncomfortable. Here we've got the 10 of Swords. So it could be that the full moon is illuminating where you need closure or where the boundaries, where you need to draw that line in the sand and be like, we are done. Whether that is with a habit that you yourself have, whether that is with a romantic partner, or whether that is with a business associate in some way, shape, or form, they really could have crossed those boundaries and you could have been like, you know what, we are done. All done. Like I said, the full moon's happening on the 13th. On the 16th, Mercury is moving back into the sign of Aries. It's moving back into your sign. And it's going to be conjunct or sitting next to Neptune. And this could feel like you are having to communicate something that feels like a sacrifice, right? Neptune is about sacrifices. It's about that higher octave of Pisces. It's that unconditional, boundless love. But it may be, especially happening in your first house, this is boundless love that you have for yourself. And that's why a line has to be drawn in the sand. We also have Mars moving into the sign of Leo on the 18th. Leo is sitting in your 5th house. And this could be, again, Mars, your ruling planet, moving into the sign of Leo, your 5th house, which is your house of self-expression, creativity, one-off love affairs, and even children, right? So if you have kids, you could have to draw that line within, like in the sand with your kiddos. But Mars moving into the sign of Leo, you could be expressing yourself like, I am so done with this mess. And on the 19th, we've got Taurus season starting. Taurus sits in your 2nd house. So your 2nd house, you can embody the energy of your 2nd house by moving slow. I know you don't like that. Allowing things to move slow. I apologize for that. I had a tickle in my throat. But allowing things to move slow being a little bit more organized and being maybe a little bit more practical about how you approach things. Here in the last week, we've got the new moon happening within the sign of Taurus. Again, Taurus sits in your second house. This is your house of self-value. This is your house, or not self-value, self-worth. This is the house of our values, what it is that we value, our house of money and financial aspects, and financial, not aspects, but financial assets. Here we go. And material possessions. With you guys, it looks like the new moon in Taurus is going to prompt you to kind of go on a spiritual journey. Maybe go on this sense of maybe even just this sense of needing to explore more within. And it could even prompt you to move away from something that you've currently been investing your money and time in. And I also forgot to mention that Venus will actually station direct here in the third week as well. And that could be the Ten of Swords reminding you of your sense of value, especially with Venus stationing direct. Venus is Libra's ruler, and Libra, there's a full moon in the sign of Libra. Okay, so Venus is stationing direct, and then she's going to move into Aries. She's going to move into your sign on the 30th. So moving back into your sign, really showcasing that sense of self-love. And that could be why, like I said before, you choose to move on to something else. Let's get, here we go. And here with the first week with the devil, if this is concerning like a romantic partnership or another person, it could be that with Venus being retrograde, the North Node in Pisces, and with Saturn being there, you could be coming across someone very controlling. And maybe you're recognizing that this is not a healthy partnership, but maybe there's this sense of trying to give them the benefit of a doubt. Like you're trying to give someone the benefit of the doubt, and yet ultimately throughout the month, you realize that, you know what? This is not what I thought it was. I'm done and I'm moving on. Here we go. Here in the first week, the devil, the King of Pentacles in reverse. You're dealing with someone who's very controlling and someone who is very self-centered. Someone who is very focused on being able to control the material world. And the King of Cups. Maybe you're approaching the situation, like I said, with some compassion. Now, if that does not apply to you, then again, this still focuses on a sense of control, maybe being a little too hard and immovable when it comes to certain areas of your life. If we're discussing Pisces, if this week we're looking at Pisces, this is your 12th house. This is your house of endings and beginnings. This is your subconscious. It could be that the devil is coming up from the subconscious, and you're could be really reevaluating your stance with money and material possessions. And it's asking you, like I said, I keep getting the feeling if something needs to soften. And here with the King of Cups, challenging these two energies right here, because these two have the tendency for control. They're very rigid and they are very focused on the material world. And it could be that maybe you need a more heart-centered approach when it comes to how you receive within the material world. It could be that you need to just allow yourself almost like to open up that heart chakra, right? Really soften those edges and maybe be a little bit less controlling. Here in the second week, the Ace of Wands in reverse, strength in reverse, a false start could really trigger that sense of self-confidence. It can really trigger your ego here. If you like, okay, this started really, really good, and now it's kind of the energy, like I said, is dying out, it could trigger that sense of self-confidence. Or it could allow, your fears and anxieties. And this is an awakening moment. This is an awakening for you, right? It looks like this is the cycle. This is the end of a cycle, really. And it could be like you're having this moment of awakening, and ultimately you end up making that choice to be like, you know what? I am done with all of this mess over here. I'm done with it. I'm drawing that line in the sand. I'm establishing this boundary. Here in the third week, the Ten of Swords in reverse, the Two of Wands in reverse. So again, a bad partnership. This is when we're looking at the full moon in Libra. So the full moon in Libra is going to realize where you're done with this sense of bad partnership, whether that's with a business contact or a relational, like someone in your life, someone you're close to, maybe even a romantic partner. And then the Empress in reverse. So you've got some major arcana. Of course you do. We just experienced an eclipse in your sign. You've got Pisces and Mercury traveling in your sign. And not only that, you've now got Neptune in your sign. Okay. So there's a huge amount of energy that is culminating around your sense of self. Because this is Aries rising. So we're looking at the first house. This is a lot that's happening around your sense of self. But you're doing too much. You're doing way, way, way too much. Maybe you are a little too dependent on I don't want to say other people. It could be that you're a little too dependent on other people to define your value. Because again, the Empress is ruled by Venus. She's Taurus energy. So it could be you're a little too reliant on other people for you to determine what's valuable versus what isn't. When it comes to work, it could be that you're starting off the month with this realizing that maybe there's an unhealthy attachment that's occurring. And there's a need to, like I said, soften those edges, step more into that compassionate nature, maybe be a little bit more selfless versus selfish. Here with, like I said, the Ace of Wands in reverse on the second week, realizing that the energy is slow. I don't have the energy to do this. It's triggering my self-confidence. It's triggering my ego. I'm having this awakening moment here in the third week, again, with Libra being the highlight because of the full moon, drawing that line in the sand and being like, I am done. I am done with, I don't want to say I'm done with this bad partnership, but if it's not including another person, this could simply be like, I am done with not having a plan on how I want to move forward. I am done with not evaluating this situation for what it is. And I am done with doing it all for everyone else. I'm done with overwhelming myself. I am done with putting so much on my plate and choosing here in the last week to move forward. The Eight of Cups, the Three of Wands, very nice. The Three of Wands, waiting for those ships to come in, kind of waiting on that divine timing, right? It's almost like this sense of control is what causes the false start. It's what causes the energy to be slow. And then when you finally realize that you just can't do that anymore, and you put those boundaries in place, you're like, I'm going to go, I was about to say a walkabout. We're not in Australia, but if you are in Australia and you're listening, you're going to go on a walkabout. And you're going to do that little bit of soul searching. And ultimately, it's kind of like just realizing that it's all in divine timing. And the Three of Cups in reverse. I'm having so many different thoughts as to what this could mean. And I know I've mentioned several different things, and I'm trying to keep it as cohesive as I can and kind of just stay, not necessarily in one lane, but let's not add a third lane into this. If this is regarding another person, you could realize that you walking away could result in the loss of a friendship, right? The loss of a friendship, the loss of what you thought was a support system. And that's what the Three of Cups in reverse is representing. Or it could be realizing that you feel very alone and you feel very isolated, right? Like maybe you feel like you're lacking the support that you actually need, right? And with the word of armor being in reverse, maybe you're too armored. You need to soften. Allow this sense of vulnerability. Recognize that you cannot do it all on your own, and you're going to need the assistance or help of someone, a friend, a coworker, someone that you feel like you can truly trust and rely on, someone that you feel like is dependable. But ultimately realizing that maybe I don't have the support system, or just feeling like I don't have a support system, right? And it even the Three of Cups, if you're having to walk away from something that you would have invested emotional time into, it can feel really disheartening to have to walk away from that, right? Because you don't feel like celebrating. You're like, I don't feel like celebrating. I don't feel like being joyous and happy right now. I need to maybe just take some time for myself. And that's okay too. There we are. I was like, what deck are we using? Let's see. Nothing is yet set in stone. So you cannot continue to control this. You cannot continue to control. And again, if we're looking at the Pisces energy, which is kind of being highlighted here, you cannot control other people. You cannot control maybe your financial situation. There's always going to be ebbs and flows. You cannot control those things. And the more you try to control it, the more it can become obsessive. The devil is obsessive energy, right? It's obsessed with the material world. It's obsessed with a little too focused on security and comfort and how material things provide that. So here, nothing is yet set in stone. And when the King of Cups appears, he's in a place of acceptance and he's in a space of emotional regulation to recognize that. He's surrendered. And he's like, nothing is yet set in stone. Just because this one moment in time looks this way does not mean that every other time is going to look this way. Here in the second week, the energy is gaining momentum. Right. And like I said, it feels like control here in this first week. And then it comes to this sense of awakening, this sense of realization that you cannot do it all on your own. And then we're moving into this energy of softening. And like I said, the energy is gaining momentum. It's really building up at this point here in the second week, probably leading up to that full moon, because the full moon happens on a Sunday. So it's actually sitting on the cusp of these two energies. But because it's a Sunday, I tied it into the third week. So the energy is building to this moment right here. Don't let pride get in your way. Do not be afraid to acknowledge when you're doing too much. Don't be afraid of acknowledging that, like, look, I've taken on more than I can handle. Don't let pride get in the way of allowing you this sense of peace and connectedness and freedom that maybe you're not feeling right now at the moment. A win-win outcome is in the forecast. This sense of control is kind of blocking the energy, but I do feel like it could have just been a learning moment. Your 12th house is being activated with these retrogrades happening in Pisces. Your 12th house is being activated. And then moving into the solar eclipse, because we haven't hit the solar eclipse yet by the time I'm doing this reading, We haven't hit that yet. So this energy is really building. And by the time it hits that full moon in Libra, it's hit its peak. And now it kind of like, it's like, I just imagine kind of getting smacked in the face with a wave, but not so much to where it feels surprising and unexpected, but almost where it feels like a relief. Kind of like this tension builds and builds and builds and builds, and then it just releases to the point where now you feel like, oh, I see what needs to happen now. Whew. And we're stepping into this space of you recognizing divine timing. Right? So I hope this reading helped. I was about to say, I hope this energy helped. I hope this reading helped. I hope you guys have an incredible April, and we will see you next time.